Oh, Panty just suddenly got a whole lot bigger. If somebody did that in real life, I'd be very alarmed. Unless that person's name was Bruce Banner, then I'd expect it. Well, I'll probably go ahead and get started here. So, oh, no need to apologize. I mean, you know, you get bigger. It happens. I turn into a dinosaur sometimes. I'm actually going to start over here. This little thing here that I'm standing next to that has little labels, the celestial sphere, which I think if you click on it, you get a note card that has all kinds of text on it. This is a very tiny planetarium that, in fact, with a little bit of camming around and alt-clicking on the Earth, you could probably look at it from the inside and have it function like a planetarium, sort of. But the whole purpose of this celestial sphere model is to look at it from the outside. And the celestial sphere, it's named after what, it's named after what Western civilization thought the universe, in fact, was like way back in ancient Greek times. And it was Ptolemy who was the one who systematized a lot of this and who gave a lot of math that allowed us to figure out where to find stars and planets and all that kind of thing in the sky, different times of the year and different times of day. So the idea was there were a whole bunch of celestial spheres out there, or crystal spheres, sometimes they were called, and the Earth was at the center of the whole thing. So if you look at my little model here, you'll notice at the center of it, in fact, I'm going to move it around a little bit, just point it up, just it's easier to think about. If you look at the model there, you'll notice, yes, there's a little Earth at the center. The Earth is at the center of it, and concentric spheres were outside with the Moon and Venus and Mercury and the Sun and Mars and Jupiter and Saturn, which at the time were all the known planets. And in fact, yes, once upon a time the Moon and the Sun were considered planets. Planet was a wandering star. So those were all on spheres, and then outside of the whole thing was the celestial sphere, which is what all the quote-unquote fixed stars rode on. And they thought this was their model that they used to calculate where stuff was, but they also thought this is the way reality really was. And of course, with Copernicus and then later Kepler and Newton, we figured out that actually the sun is at the center and the Earth goes around the sun. But okay, whatever. However, we still actually sometimes talk about the celestial sphere because when it comes to understanding how stars rise and set, it helps us to think about it by pretending all of the stars are at exactly the same distance. Now, that distance is huge when we pretend this, so it doesn't matter where we are on the Earth. We'll see the stars at the same spot, but they're not really there. Of course, they're all spread out through space, but from our point on the Earth, we can't really tell. You know the effect of parallax, that if you move back and forth, in fact, you can just do this. You see that there's a tree behind you or something. If you alt-click on it and then hold down all of Control, Alt, and Shift and move your mouse left and right a little bit, you'll see the tree move relative to the stuff that's behind it. That's parallax. And we do see parallax with stars, where the closer stars move relative to the further ones away, but the effect is so tiny that humans were looking for it for a couple hundred years before they actually found it. And to observe it, you need telescopes. The biggest parallax that any star exhibits is similar to, or a little smaller than, the amount that the atmosphere blurs out stars when you're looking through a telescope at a pretty good sight. So basically the fixed stars, as far as we can tell, as far as we can see, don't move. So we pretend they're all on this gigantic sphere that's plastered around the Earth, and then we use that as a model, and we actually have math to go with all of this, and the math isn't that hard. It just involves knowing that we pretend the sky goes around once every 24 hours. Of course, you know it's the Earth going around. So in reality, if you look at it, you see here's the Earth going around at a vastly accelerated rate. Really, it takes 24 hours to make one circle. But if you imagine that you're standing, see Africa, well, I don't know what went by for you. It'll be different for each viewer. But imagine that you're standing, say, in Africa, and as the Earth goes around, you'll notice that what is overhead is a different part of the sky at different times. So we then pretend that it's actually the sky that is rotating in the opposite direction. So really it's the Earth rotating, but from our point of view, it looks like the sky rotating. And yes, it turns out that we can make measurements to confirm that it really is the Earth rotating. There are things like the Coriolis effect, which is what seeds and causes cyclones and such to grow. What are the hurricanes? Right, I'm in the northern hemisphere. I ought to know what a hurricane is. So yes, we know the Earth is really rotating because there are physical effects associated with that, but we can't feel it. And if we're trying to point a telescope, or if we're just trying to look in the sky, the telescope's rotating with the Earth. So we go into that frame of reference and pretend the sky is rotating. And then we can use that to describe at different times over the course of the night, or over the course of the day and the night, where will the various stars be. So geologists use this reverse logic with polar wandering paths and plate tectonics. Okay, I guess I didn't know that. But yeah, sometimes it just makes sense to pick the thing that you're on and call that the frame of reference, even though it may not actually really be a true inertial frame, and it might be slightly perverse from a broader view. But if your point is to describe what you're going to observe, sometimes it actually makes sense. So that's great. So that's what the sky looks like. But of course, most of us are not right at the North Pole. So if you look, you'll notice I have a bunch of pink stuff on here. Sticking out of the Earth, there's two gigantic pink poles for the North Pole and the South Pole. The Earth isn't really, or the poles don't, first of all, they're not real. Second of all, if they were real, they wouldn't be that huge. Although that's kind of a weird thing to say about something that it's not real, right? If it's not real, how do I know what it would be like if it were real? Interesting question. So those are the poles. They point to the north and south poles, and you'll notice, if you cam around a bit, you look at the grid, that the grid of the sky also comes to a point at the north and south, just like if we had drawn longitude and latitude. We actually call them right ascension and declination. It's the coordinate system we use to describe where things are on the sky. And the grid, the north pole of the grid, or of the sky, the north celestial pole, is directly above Earth's north pole, and the south celestial pole is directly below Earth's south pole. And then that big pink ring that you see is the equator. It's the celestial equator, which is right over Earth's equator. Right, so I mean, you can turn these things off and see what would the sky just look like if it was by itself, but I like to leave it on because it helps give us a point of reference for this. So this is great, and this would be if you were at the North Pole. I'm going to turn that back off again. This would be if you were at the North Pole, but of course, in reality, we're not really at the North Pole, most of us. Somebody might be. But in reality, most of us are probably in the Northern Hemisphere, with all apologies to Jess, but we'll get to that in a moment. Does somebody have the thing selected? Seem to be moving. Click, click. All right, I'm going to reset. Ah, there we go. Latitude 0, latitude 45. Yeah, okay, fine. I just had to reset it. So from our point of view, the sky looks more like this, and that's a little weird to think about. So what I'm going to do is turn on the horizon. So this now is what it's going to look like when we go inside the planetarium. The brown thing is the ground, although really the ground should be a little lower. And if you zoom, you can notice it's just tangent to the surface of the Earth there. And so that, of course, we're really tiny standing on the Earth and we can't see through it. So this brown plane approximately cuts off what you can see, and we can see everything above and nothing below. So then as the sky rotates, you know, if you look to the east, you see stuff rising. If you look to the west, you see stuff setting. If you look to the south, you see stuff moving left to right across the sky. Now, if you're Jess and you're down here in the southern hemisphere, you actually look north to see the stars crossing the sky, and they cross right to left. So it looks a little bit different. Things still rise in the east and set in the west. It's just that you can't see the North Pole, but you can see the South Pole. And you can see other cool things like Alpha Centauri and the Magellanic Clouds that those of us in the northern hemisphere don't ever get to see. So if I go back to latitude 45, right, so that's what it looks like to us. But of course, it's not really doing that. We pretend it's a little ball rotating, and it makes it easier to calculate where stuff is going to be. But kind of what's really going on is, if I put north up, what's really going on is this, is that as the Earth rotates. The ground, of course, rotates with it, and so different parts of the sky are above ground and different parts of the sky are below ground, and you can imagine trying to calculate everything like this with this big, tilted, rotating horizon would be a lot more complicated. And so that is really why we pretend the sky is rotating, because it just makes a lot of the calculations a lot easier and gives us a very simple coordinate system for looking in the sky and pointing the telescope, and it's also very closely matched to what we see. So if you want, you can come back and play with this. You can play with this zenith up. There we go. You can play with this celestial sphere later. There's a note card that tells you how to do it. The control pad over here, anybody can click the stuff and make things go. I didn't tell you that before because if everybody did it at the same time, it would be a nightmare. But feel free to come by and play around with it sometime. So anyway, what we're going to do now is we're going to go inside the planetarium, and the planetarium is basically just a very much larger version of exactly the same thing. Except there I can turn the grid on and off. I don't think I can do that here, can I? No, I can't turn the grid on and off, but I'll do that inside the planetarium. But we will be inside the whole thing and looking at it from inside. There's some advantage in looking at it from outside because it's easier to kind of understand the model as a whole. But of course, when you look at the sky, we're looking at it from below, from the Earth, and it's all far out there, so it's more like we're inside. So this will probably take a couple minutes to do, everybody, but basically follow me over here, and you'll see there's a little teleport pad, and all you have to do is right-click on the teleport pad and select teleport, and that will teleport you inside. Just give it a couple minutes so everyone can get in here. And yeah, feel free to sit on one of the little seating pads there. I think they have sit targets, but they don't have sit animation, so whatever your own sit animation will be, you'll get to use. They may not even have sit targets. They may just be a little thing that you can sit on the old-fashioned way, because I see one person sat backwards. You sort of want to sit facing the center, and this is traditional in planetariums, at least planetariums in the northern hemisphere. I don't know, in the southern hemisphere they may do it opposite, but in the northern hemisphere it's very traditional to sit in the planetarium facing south, so the southern sky and the southern horizon is in front of you, with the North Pole behind you somewhere. And I wonder, actually, most planetariums also try to line themselves up to match reality. Did I do that here? I did. Look at that. I actually did line it up so that north in Second Life is also north in the planetarium. Yeah, most planetariums do that. All right, and I guess I don't have enough seats for everybody. Is there anyone still outside? There's a couple people outside. I see Chantal is out there and Alyssa. So I don't know if you guys can hear me out there. I don't know what the range of voice is, but feel free to come on in. All right, so this, like I said, is a much bigger version of what was outside. It does have the Earth, so if you look here, you'll notice there's an Earth. And I'm using this little camera gadget. This red arrow is something that Jeremy Linden made, at least if you can believe the creator on the script and the gadget, that follows my camera around and then I can freeze it. So I'm going to use this to point at stuff. I can't just use a little laser pointer like I do on the screen because I'm looking in full 3D here. So if you zoom over on the Earth and you look at it, you'll notice, yes, there's a little Earth at the center, just like in the other model. It's not to scale in that even the closest star, Alpha Centauri, is much, much farther away compared to the size of the Earth than the edge of the planetarium's dome is from this Earth here. But it does give you the sense that the sky is big around the Earth. And what's more, if you look at the Earth, you'll notice there's a few things there. Hovering over it, you might have to zoom in on the Earth to see it. There's a longitude, a latitude, a date, and a time, and that tells you what the planetarium is currently set to. If you look at the top of the Earth, you'll notice that what is on top, pointing up, is the eastern side of the United States. I actually set the longitude and latitude very close to where I live in western Pennsylvania, and if you know the United States and where the various states are, you'll say, okay, that's about where it is. So I just have that set right now. And then the sky looks like nothing like what the sky outside looks like, because outside there's clouds everywhere, and I don't actually have clouds in this planetarium. But even if there weren't clouds everywhere outside, the sky wouldn't really look like this, because of course the sun is up, and when the sun is up, you can't see all the stars. So over here I've got the sun. That thing there is the sun, and you can try clicking on it, in fact, and it should tell you it's the sun. Although occasionally when you click on stuff, it won't tell you, and that's because, for technical reasons I'll go into later when I talk about how I built this thing. And there's two little balls next to it. That's Saturn and Venus. So Saturn and Venus are both very close to the sun right now, which means that we won't be able to see them. Very sad. And then off to the right, there's another planet, which is, I think that's Jupiter. Nope, that's Mercury. I should have known. Jupiter's brighter. And then if you look down, sort of over here-ish, you look down over there-ish, you can see there's two more planets, and that is, in fact, Jupiter and Mars over there. So, what does this mean? What this means is that if somehow I was able to go outside and pump out all the atmosphere from the Earth, I would die. But if I was somehow able not to die, either because I have a spacesuit or because I am strong with the Force or whatever it is you use to survive in a vacuum, I would be able to see a bunch of planets right now. Mercury and Jupiter and Saturn and Venus, although Saturn and Venus would be really hard because of the glare of the sun. All those planets are up. Pretty cool. But great. And you also notice here's the sun here, and the sun is pretty low in the southern horizon, and that's what happens in the winter. Pretty low above the southern horizon, I should say. And because it's close to noon, again, if you zoom on the Earth, you can see it says 1318, so that's 1:18. It's about an hour after noon. The sun is sort of midway between east and west. Now you're wondering, okay, how do you figure out which way is east and west? Well, I can actually turn on a grid, just like the grid we had outside. So I just turned on a grid. It may take a little while for the textures to res for all of you. But if you look around, and in fact, depending on your graphics cards, with all the avatars in here, I'm a little worried that nobody will have enough texture memory to do all this right. But if you look around, you see not just the stars, but you'll see a green grid, very much like the green grid on the celestial sphere outside. And you'll notice that near the center of the grid, it's labeled 18 hours, about 2 grid steps above the sun. And then, if you look around, look over to your left. Let me turn my camera back on. I should make a shortcut for this, so I don't have to type it every time. If you look over here to the left, you will notice that there's labels in degrees. 20 degrees, 40 degrees, you look like that, all the way up to 80 degrees, and then right at the point up here, you will see right here, there's a star right near the pole, and that's the North Star. And we call it the North Star because it's right at the North Pole of the Earth. Polaris, indeed. It has a name. It's called Polaris, and I'm guessing that has nothing to do with the fact that it's at the pole. Just sheer coincidence. So, if you look over to the left, you see that's the east, and you look to the right, that's the west. It's labeled 0 hours, 22 hours, 20 hours, 18 hours. Why is it labeled like that? Those are the coordinates of right ascension, as we call it. Now, you see the 20, 40, 60, 80 degrees, those kinds of things. Those are the coordinates of declination. They're just like latitude. 0 degrees is the equator, 90 degrees is the North Pole, minus 90 degrees is the South Pole. You can tell that this coordinate system was invented by people in the Northern Hemisphere, because positive is north and negative is south, and, you know, but whatever, most of us are, and if Jess wants to cause trouble about it, I'm sure we can all beat her up. But, in the meantime, that all makes sense. Degrees, it's a big circle around the sky. But why would you label right ascension in hours? And the reason for that is, if you think about it, it takes 24 hours for the Earth to make one complete rotation, which means from the point of view of the Earth, it takes 24 hours for the sky to make one complete rotation. Now, it turns out that's not exactly right. It's actually 23 hours and 56 minutes, but we're pretty close. And that's for because the sun goes around the Earth and it makes it complicated. But it's very close to 24 hours, which means if you wait 1 hour, the thing that is right overhead or right to the south will be 1 hour bigger of right ascension. So if I was to jump ahead by 2 hours, it would go from 18 hours to 20 hours. In fact, let me try and do this. So actually, yeah, it still works in the southern hemisphere. Yeah, this is why telescopes have clock drives. Toilets do not flush backwards in the southern hemisphere because of the Coriolis effect. In fact, there's a great whole thing written by Phil Plait years and years ago where he talked about, if I ripped my toilet off of the wall, took it on an airplane down to the southern hemisphere and flushed it, it would not flush the other way. And he's right. It wouldn't flush at all, because if you rip the toilet off from the wall, it is no longer connected to the plumbing. So, but yeah, and a friend of my sister's once said she was at one of the equator. There's a bunch of countries on the equator. It was probably Brazil or something like that. But right at the equator, there was a guy there doing a little demonstration with he had a bucket of water, or a shallow bucket of water, and he'd pull a plug out of the bottom and it would swirl out one way, and then he'd walk across the equator, fill it up, pull a plug out, and would swirl out the other way, and he'd claim that was the Coriolis effect, and that's all BS. The Coriolis effect is tiny on those kinds of scales, and what's more, it is tiniest right at the equator. So there's absolutely no way the Coriolis effect would have any meaningful effect on that. Just random little breezes are going to make a bigger difference. So the guy was faking it. But, you convince people. But, people faking stuff and convincing people of stuff is sort of standard human behavior. It only matters on really big scales, and that's when you get hurricanes and cyclones, and even that, it's not Coriolis effect drives it. It's that you get temperature differentials and air starts moving, and the Coriolis effect gives it a slight tendency to go some way, and then it all builds up, and then you have weather. So, all right. So what I was saying was there is a way I can jump the time ahead a little bit. Now, I don't have a button just for that, so I have to remember exactly what the command is. So give me one moment while I figure this out. I think, let's see if I might be about to do this horribly wrong. So if you look now, you'll notice it says the time is 13:23:55. And looking overhead, you see that between 18 hours and 20 hours is due south. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point at 18 hours here with my camera. Oh, that didn't work. Oh, because I did the command wrong. Let me try that again. There it is. All right, so I'm pointing the pointer right at 18 hours. And now if I jump ahead, so it says it's about 13:24, and I give it the command, one moment. Is it that? Yes, okay. I have to remember which channel I talk on as well. So I'm going to go instead to 14:24:56, and go. And you'll notice when I jumped the time ahead by 2 hours, I only jumped ahead by 1 hour. Oh, that's fine. And you'll notice that the pointer is right between 18 and 19 hours. And if you look at the Earth, it just jumped back because, of course, what it's doing is updating with regular time. So let me just stop it and do that again. And this time I'll really jump forward 2 hours. So I'll say time 15:25:11. And oops, except I set it to the wrong channel because you just saw me say it there. It goes ahead 2 hours. So you'll notice 2 hours from now at 3:15, the sun's getting awfully low in the sky. That's what happens in winter. And if you look at the Earth, you'll see it's right at 15:25:10 right now. So that's why we use hours to label it, because the hours is actually yeah, that's right. We're getting really close to the we're getting very close to the equinox. It's just a couple days. No, we're past it. The equinox was a couple days ago. Wow, I missed it. So that's why we label it in hours. Now, there's lots of things you can do with this planetarium. I'm going to go back. You'll notice over here. In fact, I'll zoom so you can see where I'm talking. I'll set the camera. should zoom over to there, and then I'll stop it. There's a bunch of panels here in the center. Oh, it didn't freeze, though, so it's now going all over the place. Now it should freeze where I was looking. You notice there's a bunch of panels here, and the one in particular I'm pointing at, if you try and push them, they won't do anything right now. I have a presentation mode where it won't accept commands from anyone but me or people I put on the authorized list. But I'm going to click the button that says real time, and you'll notice it jumps back. And what that does is I don't remember how long, every 30 seconds or so, it updates the time. So you'll notice here on the Earth, it says time 1326. It's keeping up with time on the East Coast. That UTC -5 tells you which time zone you're in. UTC is universal time, coordinated. -5 is for the East Coast when we're not on daylight savings time. And so it'll just keep up. And over the course of the day, the stars will rise and set, but it doesn't move very fast. And suppose we wanted to see what is it like if we sped up time and we want to see the whole sky rotate just like it did outside. And so for that, I have the faster button down here, which I have to push several times. I need to actually tune up the speeds on this because I have to push several times before you actually see it moving. So I'm going to push the faster button a few times. There it goes. And you can see the planetarium start to move. And let's go faster still, and faster still, and faster still. Okay. Now, so this is what it looks like outside. Now, what will probably happen as you observe this is every so often it's going to lurch. So it's rotating and lurching. And when I talk about how I built this thing, I'll explain why that happens. And it's one of the things about Second Life that I'd like to fix. But so now here's another thing to watch. You'll notice the sun's about to come up. Come up, sun. The sun is getting low. Yep, there's the sun. Now the moon's going to come up a little bit later. And you will notice there's the moon. The moon is crossing to the south. It's about half moon now. You'll notice the moon is moving relative to the grid. And that's because every so often I have the moon update its position to keep track with where the moon really is. So you can actually use this planetarium to see roughly where in the sky is the moon and what is the phase of the moon. If we keep going enough days, eventually you'll see the moon will become full. So the moon, oh, there, yeah. And that's why I only have a handful of phases for the moon, something like 6 phases waning and 6 phases waxing. So I don't have a lot of detail on the moon, but you can see close to what the phase of the moon is. But you notice here the sun is at 18 hours, the moon is at 2 hours, it's gibbous, it's not quite full, it's near full. So yeah, so you see the moon moving around the sky, and if you go far enough, the planets will move as well. So all of the planets should be in the right place for where they are, different things in the sky. And yeah, it's making you dizzy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop the rotation. And when I did it, and you probably all saw slightly different things, when I did it, it lurched back a bit after it stopped. But yeah, if you go into mouse look and you just look straight overhead and you have a big gigantic screen, you might feel like you're rotating, and then you might throw up or something like that, which I think is the true promise of VR, virtual reality, is making people throw up as they move around, but their inner ear fluid does not feel the motion as they're moving around, and they all get sick and dizzy. Yes, it's just like reading in the car, except the opposite. So yes, you can get car sick without being in a car. Yay, VR! Whatever. I know people who can't play first-person shooter games. They get sick just from that. They probably have the same problem in Second Life, so whatever. Yep, vomit. Always something to aspire to. All right, so that's great. So, you know, it's a full-on planetarium. You can look around. You can see the stars. You may actually recognize some of the constellations. In fact, let me zoom in on one that lots of people know. Jess, have you ever been to the Northern Hemisphere? So what I'm pointing out over there in the north, if you look north, is the Big Dipper, which is one of the 2 easiest constellations in the sky to find. I'm going to turn off the right ascension declination grid just to make it easier to see. Yeah, Jess, sorry. So 16 years ago, although, wait, you were 10 or something at the time, weren't you? Jess is, actually, Jess is old now because she's more than half my age. What we're looking at there is the Big Dipper, which everybody in the Northern Hemisphere knows because it's one of the easiest constellations to find. The other one is Orion, which we see both northern and southern hemisphere because it's right near the equator. And of course, if you don't have a big grid on the sky to tell you where to look, there are these two stars here. There are these two stars here called the pointer stars, which if you follow the direction they're sort of pointing on the sky, you will eventually get to the North Star up here. And actually, if you zoom in on the North Star, you might see zoom in a lot on it. It looks like there's a couple of triangles cutting it off. And that's also, I'll explain why that happened in a little bit as well. I'm going to freeze the camera here at the North Pole for now. Right, so you've got the stars, you've got the sun, you've got the planets. What else can you do with this? Well, all right, the other thing you can do, you notice I jumped ahead in time. We also can jump around in space by going to different latitudes and longitudes. So here's what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and take us right to the North Pole. And there's various ways you can do that, but the easiest way is to set your latitude just to 90. And there's 88.8, 88.9, 88.1. Okay, I've set the latitude to 89.1. That's pretty good. Oh, yeah, it's right at 90. Go. Zoom. All right, so this is what it would look like at the North Pole. So it's hard to get your bearings if you're right here. So you'll notice, first of all, that something went horribly wrong because the sun shouldn't be up. Or what time is it? I'm very confused. I don't know why I see the sun, because the sun should not be above the horizon if I am at latitude. Oh, no, I'm in August. Yeah, if you zoom on the date, you'll say 2017-821. So let's come back to today. So I'm going to go back to real time. Click. There we go. I think what it did is it got reset. You'll notice it's at UTC -7. I think it got reset to a default thing. Anyway, so we come back to now. The sun is not up. Over the course of the day, the sun will not come up at all. If you look straight up, you will see the North Pole. Well, so first of all, I'm going to find the Big Dipper. Big Dipper, where are you? I can't find it. Maybe it's gone. There's Leo. There is Cassiopeia. All right, if that's Cassiopeia, then the Big Dipper's over here. Yes, good. Yep, thank you. I just found it. All right, so here's the Big Dipper over here. And so you can use the pointer stars to point to where the North Pole is supposed to be. And it's right there. Oh, what just happened? Oh, that's what happened. Okay. And sure enough, it is straight up right overhead. So that's what you would see if you were on the North Pole. Now, what's kind of cool is stars don't rise and set if you're at the North Pole. So I'm going to speed up the rotation here so we can see what it looks like when the sky is rotating at the North Pole. And you'll notice that just what happens is the sky just kind of rotates around us. Nothing rises or sets. There's some stars that just skim right along the horizon, and it just rotates right around us. Now, you remember when I first came to the North Pole, it was actually August. In August, the sun was up. In December, the sun is down. That's what happens at the North Pole. So winter is night at the North Pole. It's kind of depressing. And summer is day. So that's what it would look like at the North Pole. So you can also play around with the planetarium, and you could see what would it look like at different spots. Now, I do have a default position. The default position, so first of all, when I first created this planetarium, it was around 2009, and I think I either was working at Linden Lab or I had just left Linden Lab. So I actually set the default position to be San Francisco. So here is now, if you were in San Francisco right now, and if you look at the Earth, you can see now the west coast of the United States is overhead. And you'll notice over in the east, that's where the sun is rising. So I have a command. It's not something that's on the panels here, but I do have a command that lets me jump straight to San Francisco. But we could jump to other places as well. It's like, for example, we could jump down to Australia. Do you know your latitude and longitude, Jess? I'm going to guess it. I'm going to guess that your latitude is -50. It's probably too far south. -40 about. And your longitude is probably, Does anyone know the longitude of Australia? That's not Australia, that's Chile. But whatever, I got pretty close. Chile, Australia, it's all in the southern hemisphere. So if you were in Chile right now, well, one thing to notice is the sun is to the north, but it's also really high in the sky. And that means it's summer. It's summer. It's very close to the summer solstice as opposed to the winter solstice in the southern hemisphere. So that's pretty cool. So if you look to the north, you see the sun high in the sky. Yeah, it's summer where Jess is too. And I totally guessed your longitude wrong, but whatever. You know, it's not like I know where the Earth is or anything like that. So we can look in the south. If I turn the right ascension declination grid back on, I can do that. And you will notice, great, thank you. You will notice that at the South Pole here, there's no star. There is no South Star. That makes it harder to find the South Pole. But if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, I think you get to, and you care about astronomy, you get to know things like the Southern Cross. There's Magellanic Clouds you can see, which the planetarium doesn't have, sadly. And if I start the sky rotating again, or make it rotate faster, maybe version 2.0, or actually what I really want to do is just add various different skies to this. You can see facing south in the South Pole looks like facing north in the North Pole, except that now the stars are moving clockwise instead of counterclockwise. So here's a tip. If you wake up on a desert island and you have no idea where you are, wait till night, look at which way the stars are rotating, find the point in the sky they're rotating around. This means you have to stay up for several hours at night so you can see. If they're going clockwise, it means you're in the southern hemisphere. If they're going counterclockwise, it means you're in the northern hemisphere, and you will have narrowed down where you are to within half of the Earth, which doesn't sound very good, but hey, it's progress. So there you go. All right, so this is what it looks like. Now, of course, I usually like to think about it facing south, and if you turn around and you face north, which is where I'm looking right now, you see stars going right to left across the sky, which is when you're facing the horizon where the stars move horizontally-ish. That's what you see in the southern hemisphere. And also when you see things like Orion, they're all upside down because you're in the southern hemisphere. So the planetarium lets you jump around to different places as well as playing with different times. And another thing I did with this years and years ago, I gave a talk. I think this was back when I was still with Micah. I gave a talk about supernova, which was mentioned obscurely in Hamlet. And I actually added a supernova to I added a little spot for the supernova to the planetarium. So the way this planetarium works, there's a whole bunch of scripts that make the whole thing go. I'm going to stop it now. Actually, before I tell you, I want to show you there's one other thing you can do, and that's right. So we have this whole problem. The floor of the planetarium is basically our horizon. That's the ground. You can't see through the ground, at least not in real life. But I can turn off the floor. In fact, I can turn it off completely, so prepare for some vertigo. Boom. Now now I'm walking on nothing, and you're sitting on chairs floating in the middle of the air. And now you can see the whole sky in all directions, including the sun, which is right now below the horizon and all those kinds of things. In fact, I'm going to go click on real time again. So we go to right now. And so in Chile right now, the sun is pretty high in the sky. So there it is up there. So yes, so you can turn the whole sky all the way off, although if you find that makes you nervous, I have a way you can make it half transparent so you can see what's below it, but you also know exactly where the horizon is. And sometimes that's useful too, if you want to think about, yeah, I will turn off the floor. That'll be the end of it. Sorry, everybody. That reminds me, the very first Hardy Boys novel I ever read back in 1977 was The Disappearing Floor. Anyway. Sorry, a little bit of nostalgia there. I spent a lot of my fourth grade year reading Hardy Boys books. In fact, the first half of the year, I basically would complete a Hardy Boys book in class every day because fourth grade, the class had some issues. Anyway, we didn't have time for math, is what the teacher said, but I was reading a book in class every day. Never mind, let's not go there. That was a long time ago. In fact, if you really want the full experience, you can turn off the floor and turn off the grid, and now you just get stars. Stars, my God, it's full of stars. And it's pretty exciting. So, the way I made this thing, so when I first started in Second Life in about 2006, I think, I don't know if I look, I'll just go to my profile, let's see what my birth date was. Yes, February 2006 is when I started in Second Life, and I wasn't in Second Life very long before I learned about scripting, and of course I've been a programmer since, I don't know, since probably before Jess's parents were born. But I thought, oh, I'm going to make a planetarium. And so the first thing I did was res a sphere and try and make it big and discover I couldn't make it bigger than 10 meters. Now, you can nowadays. Sometime in the last 8 years, they removed or expanded the maximum size a prim could be. Yeah, I ran out of Hardy Boy's book. Actually, I sort of ran out of Hardy Boy's book in about 5th grade. 6th grade, I started reading 3 investigator books. I started reading Agatha Christie. I read Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Anyway, I've read a lot in my day. So anyway, I thought I'm going to make a planetarium, and then I made a sphere, and it was only 10 meters. And when you stand inside a 10-meter sphere, it's really not that big. Even the sphere I have here is kind of not that big. But I thought, well, okay, I'll do the best I can. It'll be like a one-person planetarium. And then when I texture mapped it, it looked really crappy to the north, right at the north and south poles. And I kind of gave up for a little while. But then a couple years later, I tried again. And what I did this time, just for fun, right-click on, I don't know if this will work for you, but I think it will. Right-click on the sky somewhere, and you should see a big grid of triangles all the way around you when you right-click on the sky. And so what I did is I approximated the sky as just a whole bunch of triangles, each of which is about 10 meters in size, which, again, when I built this, that was as big as you could make prims. I started with an icosahedron. An icosahedron is what other people might call a D20. In fact, I might have a D20 here I could just pull out. Boop, there's one. There's a D20. Oh, and it fell right through the floor, didn't it? That was too bad. I don't know if you even saw the D20. It probably just fell right through the floor and everything. So let me turn the floor back on. Let me res out another D20 just for fun. There we go. It's a big D20. Right. So this is and it's physical, right? You can even roll this die. So I started with an icosahedron, but the problem there was even with 10-meter sides on my icosahedron, I couldn't make the planetarium big enough. So I sat down and did a bunch of math and figured out how to position a whole bunch of icosahedrons where I subdivided each triangle of the icosahedron into 4 little triangles, and so that had the advantage of looking a little more spherical. And then I could make it the size that the planetarium is now. And I wrote a script. Basically, when I res out the planetarium, I have a little script that it puts a box down and it reses out all the triangles and it moves them all to where they need to go. So I coded all the math into that. And the other thing I did is I figured out what is the mapping from right essential and declination on the sky to position on the triangle. And I made, so if you think about 20, there's 20 things here, but I divided each face into 4 subfaces. There's 80 faces. So I had to figure out what are the 80 textures that I need in order to have all of the stars at the right place on the triangle. So you may remember when we looked at the North Star, if you zoomed in enough, you could see it was cut off like a triangle. And that's just because the North Star is right at the point of one of these triangles. Just as the way I set up the planetarium. And then the fact that it's not exactly at the point means the North Star actually isn't due north. It's just very, very close to due north. So I did that. I figured out how to make all of the textures, and so I have code on my computer. In fact, I redid the sky map about a month or 2 ago because I just didn't like the way the stars looked before. So I have code on my computer that takes a sky map, or it reads a catalog and generates a sky map and then divides it up to all the textures I need that I upload, and then I put all the UUIDs of the texture in my script. And that reses out the planetarium for me. And I sort of did the same thing for the right ascent and declination grid. One of the things I hope to do sometime is have other images that we can throw up there. So one would be like an actual night sky photograph, where instead of these stars as spots, you'll see the full glory of the night sky with the Milky Way, with the Magellanic Clouds, all that kind of thing. Another one I would like to do is maybe have the cosmic microwave background. So I just resed out another sphere. This is what I call my cosmic microwave background soccer ball. The texture that's on it is from WMAP, which is the fluctuation. So this is a really big soccer ball. They should use soccer balls this big in real life. Oh, sorry, football, for all of you who are not from the United States. There, I'm cacking it around at you. I'd like to have that. So eventually I'm going to have other textures on here. But, you know, I'm lazy, so I haven't gotten around to it. So I did that, and then each one of the planets and the sun has their own script in it, because I'm profligate. So rather than having the sky know where to put everything, basically all the sky does is it listens for commands on a couple different channels. And so when you push buttons on the panel, it sends those commands and sets the time and the date and the longitude and the latitude, and it calculates how should the sky be positioned. And then it shouts out, oh, it doesn't shout because they're all linked together. It sends a message to the other linked objects saying, hey, you guys, anyone who's linked to me, here's the longitude, latitude, and here's the time. And all of the planets then have code that figures out where should they be on the sky at that time, and so they all update themselves at various different times. So one thing that's maybe kind of fun to do, let's see if I can make this work, is I'm going to go back to San Francisco and go to August 21st, 2017. So first of all, here we go back to San Francisco. Boop. I'm going to stop the rotation just so it doesn't happen. I'm going to go to date, 2017-H21, and time, oh, I don't know. Let's go like 1 p.m. I don't remember what would be the right time. Yes, and I'm doing this all wrong because I was supposed to send it to a different channel. Boop. There we go. And if you look up there in the sky somewhere, it didn't work. Did I do it wrong? Where's the moon? Oh, no. I did it. You know why I did wrong? If you look, zoom in on the sun, the moon is actually behind the sun. So that's a problem. So that's actually not what happened. It turned out in the actual solar eclipse, the sun went behind the moon. So I have this issue right now. If you zoom in on them, you'll see they're right next to each other. But I have this issue that I seem to have put the moon in the wrong place. So now I'm going to see here. Now I'm going to do something you should never, ever do. And that is edit a script in the middle of a talk and see if I can make it better. So instead of 15.1, let's make it 15.0. Save. And when I save that, it should make the moon disappear because it gets lost. 7469, go. Oops, nope. A little bit better. I'm going to try a little bit more. So see, it's not going horribly wrong. Not yet. All right, I'm going to edit my moon script. And instead of 15.0, I'm going to make it 14.9 radius. Save. And I'm going to send a go command. There we go. Right. So now you'll notice, and this is of course the problem is I put them all right at the same distance. The planets sort of just go through each other. But now that I've moved the moon a wee bit closer, you can actually see, hey, look, there's the solar eclipse as viewed from San Francisco at 1 p.m. I just picked that time at random because I remember on the East Coast it was close to 3 or something when the whole thing happened. Now, if you will find that my positioning is not quite precise enough to get the moon to go perfectly in front of the sun, but it gets pretty close, and so you can see here that it is a little bit in front of the sun. So that's pretty wacky. So yeah, so that's a fun thing that you can do with this. So yeah, and you'll notice that when I did this, the moon, I don't know if you saw this, but the moon would briefly disappear. And that's because when I reset the script, the moon doesn't have any idea what the longitude or latitude or time or date is. And so it just goes to the North Pole because it says, I don't know where to go. I'm going to the North Pole. Bye. In fact, it doesn't even go to the North Pole. It goes straight up to the top. And I had to tell the planetarium to resend the time to all its planets before the moon would jump back to where it is. So each of the planets has their own script, and the advantage of that is it kept all the scripts fairly manageable. It also means that when there's an error with the moon, I can just change that one script without having to reset the entire planetarium, and it makes it a little less hazardous than it would have been otherwise. Right. So, here's my planetarium. It's pretty exciting. The reason you saw the lurching before, if you did, is the way I rotate the planetarium. So there's this issue in Second Life that, unlike most video games, half of what's doing is on the server and half of what it's doing is on your computer and in your graphics card. So if you sit down and you play Halo or something like that, it's all in your graphics card and it can be great. If you play something like World of Warcraft or whatever the cool kids are playing nowadays, well, it's happening on the server, but there it's also a game, and you can still there. You know, they also the developers there tune everything to do exactly what they want. But here's the thing: in Second Life, we can write scripts to do things, and the scripts can tell the server to do stuff, but it's not a very fast programming language, right? The script programming language has to share server time with every other single script on the sim, as well as the sim doing all the stuff the sim has to do. So scripts actually get a very small slice of the computer time that's given to the sim. And scripts have built-in limitations. Like if you try and rotate something, it doesn't let you rotate again for, I forget what it is, if it's half a second or something. There's a little delay before it lets you rotate again. So if I just use the script command to say, hey, set the rotation, set the rotation, set the rotation to make the sky rotate, it would be very jerky, which, you know, is okay. And you've seen a lot of animations in Second Life that are kind of jerky if you have little individual animals moving around, that kind of thing. There's another command you can do that says, that doesn't change anything server side, but tells the client, tells your computer with your viewer to rotate a thing and just set it spinning, right? And so that's a trick I used, for example, in my pulsar, which some of you may have seen in my talks, that if I pull out, you know, here's a little pulsar here, and if I click on it, you notice it just starts rotating, right? Well, server side, it's not rotating. In the server, it's just at a given position and it's static. All the rotation is just your computer has been told by the server, hey, rotate this at this rate, which means that we're not even going to be synchronized, all of us, and seeing when it's pointing in any given direction. But, you know, it works. So for the planetarium sky, however, I couldn't just rotate client side because I wanted to have it synchronized properly. I wanted to be able, over here on the Earth, I wanted to be able to say, I wanted to have the Earth point at the right direction and have the right time and date above it. So I had to do keep it synchronized server side. And I wanted smooth rotation, so I try and cheat and do both. I try and use the client side rotation, and then every so often, and when it's going slow, it doesn't matter, it's fine. But when it's going fast, it's every couple seconds, it updates the rotation to be what's really right. So that lurching happens when there's any kind of network lag or server lag that causes the server to fall a little bit behind where your client was, and then it lurches back every time I tell it to really update. And so that's just something that we have to deal with when the rotation is being controlled half and half by your viewer and by the server. Now, there is a new keyframed motion scripting that I played around with and I thought might make everything better that didn't exist back when I built the planetarium, but when I tried that, I just broke everything. And in fact, I broke it so badly that when I restored the original script, it still didn't work. So I basically had to res out a whole new planetarium. I just completely screwed stuff up. So I need to spend more time futzing with that and see if I can make it work, but I'm not optimistic yet that that's going to be the right way to do things. We shall see. Anyway, so I'm going to stop there. Does anyone want to ask me any questions? Or do you want me to go anywhere? Yeah, somebody asked, could I get a better Eclipse? What is the lag latency between servers and clients? Well, if you hold down Control Shift and 1, you should get a little window that says ping sim, and that's your typical latency. So typically it's like a tenth of a second or up to half a second. It's not too terrible, and it should be fine. The real problem is the server doesn't always run at full speed, and so there's different kinds of lag in Second Life. One of the kinds of lag, server lag, is when the server gets too busy because it's trying to do too many things. It has too many avatars in the region, or there's too many scripts, or there's too much physics, and the server slows down and doesn't run at full speed. You may notice this in a really laggy region when you walk, and you walk very slowly. That's server lag that causes that. So when that happens, time on the server advances at a slower rate. So if you tell the script to delay for 2 seconds, it might actually delay for 2.5 seconds. And there's always a little bit of that, but usually it's very tiny. So that's one reason the server will fall behind. Whereas the viewer is just going to say, you told me to rotate this, I'm just rotating it. So, stuff like that can happen. So it's a little complicated. And so I've done what I can to make it sort of smooth and keep things sort of synced, but the result is every so often you get a lurch that you don't get if you use Stellarium or if you're at a real life planetarium, something like that. But this still does let all of us sit in here together and look at the planetarium at the same time. Any other questions anyone has? Now, somebody asked if I could tune it better to get the moon right in front of the sun. So maybe, but that's hard. I'd have to pick, because in San Francisco it wasn't actually a total eclipse there. So I'd have to pick a longitude and a latitude where it really happened. So let's see. I'm going to pick Princeton, Kentucky, because that's where I was when I saw it. So that's 37.1092. Oh, and of course, the way I do this, let's see. So, or 69, 37, so 0.11, let's call that 66. Boop. And then the longitude is what? 87.9, so we'll call that 7/69 longitude minus 87, 540. That work? All right. So I believe we are now about at Princeton, Kentucky, more or less. And then what was the time of what was the time of the eclipse then? It would have been at 1:23. So let's go to like 1:24 p.m. 69. Oh, I have to make my time zone right. How do I make my time zone right? I'm just going to do this. Boop. All right. And then 7469 time 13:24:0. Boom. 70. Go. All right. So this is, and it clearly didn't work right. So I've done something wrong. Oh, daylight savings time. It was UTC -4, actually. So let me fix that. I don't like daylight savings time. Hey, where'd the sun go? What have I done? Oh, 18:24:0. Boom. Go. All right, so this, no, it's still not right. All right, anyway, I could sit here and futz with this forever. I probably won't get it exactly right. I was trying to get it lined up to where I was when I saw the eclipse, but I don't seem to have, I'm not doing it quite right. So I'd have to fudge. But I actually did that shortly after I got back from the eclipse, and it wasn't perfect. It didn't line up exactly right, sadly. So, you can use this to see about when an eclipse is going to be, but it probably won't perfectly simulate the eclipse very well. Also, if you've never seen a solar eclipse, if you ever get a chance, do it. If there's ever anyone near you, it's just totally amazing to see the thing in real life. And any picture, any simulation you've seen, there's just nothing like it when you see it in real life. So do that. All right. Anyway, before I leave, I'm going to set the planetarium back so that anybody can come in here and click on the consoles and try and do things. So feel free to come and play around with it. For things like the longitude and latitude, basically there's a long bar, and you just try clicking at different spots along the bar. Like if you look at the longitude bar, if I click in the middle, it goes near 0. I click far on the left, it's near -180. Click far on the right, it's near +180. Basically, you click all those, and then you click the set button once you have the thing where you like, and that'll change the planetarium to whatever longitude or latitude you set. So right now it won't work, but feel free to try and do that and play around with it. See what you can make the planetarium do. Somebody mentioned constellation lines. That's a good point. So that's another thing I would like to add at some point is constellation lines. So, yeah, maybe. hopefully someday I will actually stop being lazy and get it done. But anyway, thank you all for coming. And I guess, I don't know, Jess or Chantal, are there any more of these tours? I don't, because we're almost done with December at this point. All right. So I guess the next thing we'll start having talks again in January, and I know I'm doing one pretty early in January about demographics of black holes, like where are the big ones, where are the little ones. Yep, okay. Yeah, so January I'll talk about demographics of black holes. In fact, you know what's great about Second Life is it's really easy to make a model of a black hole. So all you have to do is you res a thing, and you go to the type, and you make it a sphere. Oh no, here, you res a sphere, and you go to texture, and you say texture blank, and you say color black. Done! Model of a black hole. Check it out. Unfortunately, I can't, if I step near this thing, it should stretch me out. Maybe I'll have to work on that, see if I can build an animation to completely stretch me out so we can see the tidal forces going into a black hole. All right, well, take care. Yeah, I just made a black hole just out of nothing. If only we could all do that. All right, take care, everyone, and I'll see you all next time.